We are not alone. They are among us. As the skies light up, they believe we are blissfully unaware. But this activity by non-human extraterrestrial technology is capturing the attention of humans.
My name is Dale, and I want to welcome you to my channel, Observer of Anomalous Objects. We've had quite the week. We had Chris Sharp back on Wednesday. I guess it's within a 2-week period, but it's actually over 8 days. And then on Monday, we had Chris Sharp. And today I'm really, really excited because we're going to have Ron James on. He's a filmmaker, films that you recognize, Accidental Truth, UFO Revelations. And then today, one of the things we're going to be talking about is Accidental Truth next. And so I'm really excited about that. Let me go ahead and read Ron's bio real quick for you. Ron James is an award-winning filmmaker, writer, and UFO researcher, best known for directing and producing the documentary Accidental Truth, UFO Revelations, and Accidental Truth Next. For more than a decade, he has investigated government secrecy, military encounters, and the growing body of evidence surrounding unidentified anomalous phenomenon. His work brings together testimony from whistleblowers, intelligence officials, pilots, and researchers to explore one of the most enduring mysteries of our time. Through his films and public appearances, James has become a respected voice in the ongoing conversation about transparency, disclosure, and the possibility of non-human intelligence. Well, before I bring Ron on, I'm going to go ahead and play the trailer from his latest movie, Accidental Truth Next. So let's go ahead and get that going right now.
Hey, there's aliens.
We already know life exists in the universe.
It's been over 8 years since we heard about the government UFO program, ATIP. Are we any closer to an official government disclosure regarding non-human intelligence?
They briefed us on some stuff that was frankly terrifying.
The DoD and the intelligence community is very comfortable saying it's unknown.
What are we actually talking about?
I can't share with you the details, ma'am.
There are those who will stop at nothing to hide the truth.
Whistleblowers are safe. I will guarantee that.
I have no job. My career has been tarnished.
People have been killed.
It's likely a balloon. It's likely a balloon, a bird.
It's starting to sound like a broken record.
Exotic materials are the holy grail.
I was on the team that was supposed to receive that.
What I really wanted to do was put some materials in the hands of Arrow.
That came from a UFO.
My bit is stuck. We'll have to try something else.
I mean, that stuff should have liquefied like mercury by now.
I thought it should have. I have no explanation for that.
This is a technology that has long since bled into what we call consciousness.
I'm here to drop off the samples.
Could non-human intelligence come in many forms?
Our historical timeline has been interrupted by an alien intelligence.
There's a variety of life forms.
From the earliest times, we've had writings of people interacting with non-human intelligence.
People have accepted these things as real.
All of this has to do with the nature of reality itself.
When I say we're in a simulation, there is something that is computing.
We live in something that has a software program.
It's all about consciousness.
Perhaps we've been guided subtly and deliberately.
All the religions have been telling us that there are other beings.
We're in the middle of a revolution right now.
There is a dark side to disclosure, a secret too terrible to be told.
Our future is post-biological.
In a sense, they're midwives or undertakers.
Humans served their purpose.
It may not mean surrendering our spirituality.
You can only beat down the truth for so long.
We're at a point where reality doesn't matter.
We have all new questions. It's time to discover what's next. Accidental Truth. Next, a film by Ron James, narrated by Matthew Modine.
Well, here's the man himself. What an incredible, let me get this off. What an incredible movie that you've come out with. I mean, the quality of it is just amazing when you look at all the different guests you had on and all the different areas and fields. I mean, it is well made and well represented. But you probably, like me, I don't know, when you started out, when I started out, it was all about nuts and bolts. And you've obviously not with nuts and bolts anymore, not just nuts and bolts anyway, correct?
Yeah, the film takes the viewer on a journey very similar to the journey I've been on, is, you know, starting out as a UFO investigator and spending a lot of time in Washington, D.C. I bring people behind the scenes to show them what that's really like and what's really happening there. And then, you know, midway or about 40 minutes into the film, we hit that broken record scene where it's just like, come on, man. This stuff that's unfolding in DC is a repeat performance of things we've seen before with different players and a slightly different script. So we've got to start looking elsewhere. And then we go into some very strange materials cases and some experiencer phenomenon reports. And then the last part of the film is like, okay, suppose we do have non-human intelligence around us. What does that mean? And where do we go from there? And one of the things we point out in the film is we don't even know what the right questions are, much less what the answers are going to be. So disclosure, in whatever form it comes in, the film puts out that it's really just the beginning of the story.
We don't even know what questions to ask yet.
Yeah, no, it's brought up several times in the film, and the whole tail end of the movie. You know, artificial intelligence wasn't even on our radar screen 20 years ago, at least not, you know, the normal person using it on a day-to-day basis. We're dealing with all kinds of things that we didn't even see coming, and except maybe in some of the good sci-fi movies. But at the end of the day, the question of, are we alone, and is the government finally going to tell us the truth? It's like we kind of need to get past that. One, we're definitely not alone, and two, the government is probably never going to tell us the entire truth. We're getting this kind of a joke of disclosure, and for people that know the history of all this, they understand what's happening.
Well, one thing I've noticed, you know, I've probably been in the community about 5 years. I've been an experiencer, obviously, much longer than that. But I've noticed that those who've been in the community much longer, kind of like Deborah Jordan Cobble, I mean, they tend to be the ones that are the most frustrated because, I mean, you're talking 40 years. 40 years. It's like, you know, every year, it's, you know, something's supposed to happen and something's supposed to happen. And it doesn't. And I can understand. I mean, you know, even 5 or 6 years, whatever it is that I've been here, you know, it gets frustrating. It's like a roller coaster ride. And I can't imagine riding that roller coaster for 40 years.
Yeah. I mean, really, it's been longer than that. If you think about the idea that they formed a MJ-12 type group in the late 40s, you know, that brings us out to 80 years of a definitive cover up. And, that's it. I was
talking about
to
Debbie.
See them come out with this whole dog and pony show that started in 2017 with these people coming out. What we're getting is a repeat performance of stuff that happened back in the 50s. So in the first Accidental Truth movie, which is UFO Revelations, and people can see that for free on YouTube. Not trying to plug it, but it's out there for free.
Oh, no, you should plug it. Yeah, absolutely. Should.
We replay General Samford and guys like Don Kehoe that were saying the same things then, almost to the word, that they're saying now there's technology in the skies. It's not ours. We don't know what it is. And then, now we have modern players saying the exact same thing, but they're not telling us anything new. In fact, they're continuing to act like they don't know anything about this stuff. And we point out in the new Accidental Truth movie that that's complete poppycock, and that the politicians in Washington, D.C., they know that there's more going on, but they are, as they get read into programs and they get their security clearances, they're sucked into the vortex of secrecy and become part of the problem. And
Right.
that's what we've seen happen in DC. Now we have this panel that's supposed to be at the White House with guys like Gary Nolan and Admiral Tim Gallaudet on there. And it's just like, why don't you guys just start by telling us what you know? I mean, I know Gary, I know what he knows, some of it. And Gallaudet, if he doesn't know what's under the oceans, there's not a human being on the planet that does. So what is this panel? What are you guys going to do? Sit around a table and pretend you don't know what you already, I mean, I just don't even get it. And it's just more of literally a dog and pony show dragging their feet. It's like, let's have a new panel to investigate the previous panel that investigated the panel before that investigated the one that got discontinued. It's just like, it is laughable what is happening.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I can imagine, especially for those that have been in there for a long, long time. Let's go ahead and take a step back. How did you get involved with this subject to begin with, and especially doing the research and making the films? How did that all come about?
Well, I've owned my own video production company for a long time, done a lot of music video work, and did a lot of live streaming of events and stuff before COVID. And it was probably about 2006. Steve Bassett from Paradigm Research Group came to Sedona, where I was staying at the time, and I interviewed him. And when he found out that I owned a video production company, he invited me to be involved in live streaming his events in Washington, D.C. That was like the X conference, and later the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure, which my company produced. And so the first time I went there, as a younger man, I was always interested in the topic, and guys like Nick Pope and guys like Stanton Friedman were big influences on me, because these were sane people. Nick was with the Ministry of Defense. Stanton Friedman was a bona fide nuclear physicist. I mean, these guys were the real deal, and they were taking the UFO topic seriously and not treating everybody like they would, like the ridicule factor. And so I really liked those people, and it drew me to the field and made me start asking more questions. And then when I did the first X conference, we showed up, I brought my whole production crew with a truck full of cameras, and we set it up, and we live streamed it and recorded it. And I got to meet all these guys, people I'd seen on TV, people I'd read their columns in magazines. And now I was hanging around with them, and that was really cool. And it was getting to know all of them a little bit better that made me realize that, yeah, this is the biggest deception in human history, probably. And these people are truly dedicated to getting the truth to the public. So I started, taking all of the whenever I made any money doing video production with my company, I would spend it making productions about these topics: life after death, the UFO question, and the nature of reality. That my three favorite things to dabble in. And then, of course, what I didn't understand at the time that I'm starting to understand now is that these things are all profoundly interconnected. So that was pretty interesting.
I think that's the journey that every one of us go through, or at least a bunch of us. We start off with UFOs, and then pretty soon we start finding out about, psychic stuff going on, and psionics, and Skinwalker Ranch is a perfect example of the phenomenon. I mean, we call it a phenomenon for a reason, right, Ron? Because it isn't one thing, is it?
Oh, I think the idea that there's one answer to any of this is pretty obsolete. We've got all these questions about where these non-human intelligent beings could be coming from. And there's the idea, well, maybe it's the remnants of a past civilization that's still here on the planet that had advanced technology, like Atlantis, perhaps. And that they're still here, and they live underground, and they live under the ocean. And then there's the idea of, well, what if they're just flesh and blood extraterrestrials from other planets and solar systems? And then there's the more esoteric, well, what if they're time travelers? What if they're interdimensional beings? But But I think that we're going to find out that, or what if they're a type of life that we don't even know, that we can't even describe? I think we're going to find out that it's all of the above, and that the story of human history is going to unfold in such a way that we just have to accept these things, and we're going to have to go beyond materialist science to do it.
Yeah, you think maybe it's not this or that or that, it's all of the above. I don't think we can rule anything out at this point, right, Ron?
Well, yeah, in the new film, in the Accidental Truth Next film, we talk about all this, and I see somebody in the chat room says, I believe consciousness is the key. We explore that, because if you can accept that consciousness is fundamental, which right now is it's the hard question of science. But if you can accept that consciousness is fundamental and that everything springs forth from consciousness, it actually makes a lot of this stuff easier to understand, because the physical reality that we live in, the universe that we live in, we explore simulation theory in the movie, because if consciousness is fundamental, then physical reality is by definition a simulation. It is the illusion of physical matter arising from conscious energy. So once we start to understand that these things all kind of play in with each other, then it changes the whole way we look at reality, and it changes how we treat these experiences, because we're dealing with consensus reality and subjective reality, which means that you and I, we might be living in the same world as far as we can agree that the sky is blue, and if you jump in the shower, you're going to get wet. But you're not in the same reality I'm in. I'm sitting in a room in Sedona, Arizona, looking at cactus, and you're sitting in your room with a cool background of a spaceship, living an entirely
I'm in
different
Oregon.
life within
I'm in
this
Oregon.
reality.
You would love to see where I live. Actually, nice forest. I'm going to have a hard time leaving here someday because I like it so much. Let's move on to your movies. The first one you came out with was Accidental Truth, UFO Revelations. Then you most recently, which is the one we're plugging right now, which is Accidental Truth Next. Can you kind of guide people that maybe have never seen either of those movies? What's the difference between UFO Revelations and Next? Is one leading to the other, or is it just different timestamps?
Well, if you were to watch both films one after the other, you'd see that there's it is a continuing story. We left off in the first Accidental Truth movie came out in 2023. It's narrated by Matthew Modine. He did a fantastic job, and it won 28 film festival awards and has seen by millions of people all over the world. And it's out there now for free on YouTube Movies for people to see. It started off with the history of the topic. We started off with the whole Tic Tac thing and Elizondo coming forward. It's got a lot of Lou back in the day saying things that he's not saying now, which is kind of fun to watch. But we trace the fiasco that was Project Blue Book and a lot of the things that happened. And the thrust of Accidental Truth, the first movie, and the reason they're called Accidental Truth is because as an interviewer, I'm pretty good at tripping people up and making them say things that they didn't mean to say. And so they get caught a lot. There's 3 or 4 very poignant moments where people let something slip that tells a story they weren't willing to actually tell us. And so that's where the film set got its titles. So the first Accidental Truth movie goes through the history and the way the new narrative, we call it, that started in 2017 is really just this way of whitewashing the past 50 and 100 years so that they don't have to take accountability for the things that they've done. And when I say that, I'm talking about the secrecy, the way they've taken this technology and kept it from humanity, the people that have profited from it. There's, literally crimes against humanity that have been committed by this secrecy. So in 2017, they tried to roll out what they called a new narrative. We stopped at Project Blue Book. Government hasn't been involved in anything UFO ever since, until we did this thing with Robert Bigelow, and it ended up at the Pentagon, and Lou Elizondo pops out. And that whole story is a complete lie. Their first attempt was, let's just whitewash these past years so that we don't have to take any accountability. So the first Accidental Truth movie points that out in a very real way. And then goes on to talk about very specific cases like nitinol and where that originated, the shape-shifting, memory-retaining alloy that we possess that has a nefarious past. And then we go into starting to explore consciousness and some of the programs that people like John Alexander was involved in. So that movie's, it's pretty cool. It starts off a little bit of a history lesson. It takes us to some very strange cases. And then it takes us kind of off the rails into the idea that consciousness is a big part of this. In the second movie, we pick up where we left off with the political process. Right when Accidental Truth came out in 2023, very shortly after, we had David Grush just all of a sudden pops up. And the story that David Grush is telling is the story that we're telling in the movie of these reverse engineering programs and of this history of all this stuff. So here comes David Grush. And so what we share in the new movie is we interviewed Ross Coulthart and Ralph Blumenthal about what it took to get David Grush into the public domain. It took over a year, and there was a lot of cloak and dagger. It's a really interesting story. And then I take you inside the offices of congressmen to see what they're hearing from the UFO community, which is a really interesting story. And then we actually meet up with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. I go to Ohio to take samples of a metal that supposedly came from a UFO, and we bring them back to her to turn over to Arrow. And that's a whole wild story how that plays out. And then after that, we've got the materials cases that are very strange. And then the very end of the movie, I'm taking the audience way further than anything else has gone. And the reason this film's called Accidental Truth Next is because the last part of the movie is about what's next. It's not so much illustrating how this is going to play off on society or those kinds of questions. It's illustrating that we're not asking the right questions yet. And it goes into the nature of reality. It goes into simulation theory. It goes into AI. It goes into how this all fuses with our traditional teachings and, where humanity is going to end up potentially. And so it's got a huge cast of people. There's 25 different people in the film, everyone from Lou Elizondo to multiple Congress people to Whitley Strieber and Rizwan Virk. And Gary Nolan once again appears in the second movie. He's really good. So yeah, it's both movies together are one long story, but the new one is just an absolute meandering journey through my journey that I share with the audience. And it will leave you spellbound. People have told me it's pretty moving and thought-provoking.
The most troubling thing that you said that I've heard is just the fact, which we've all seen it. Maybe we didn't all think of it, but that history seems to be repeating itself. And one of the things is, if you don't learn from the past, one of the great sayings is, if you don't learn from the past, you're doomed to, to make the same mistakes. And so I guess that's what we have to learn, don't you think, Ron? Whatever it was that stopped them in the past, if we don't learn from that, same thing's going to happen to us again. We have to figure out what the mechanism is, or whatever, the issue is that has basically stopped us in our tracks. And you made a valid point, because I'm big on exposure right now. That's one thing I like about what's going on. There's no question that we're getting a lot of exposure. I mean, that is, if you want to look at a measuring stick, you can put that out there and you can see it. But before the CIA got involved with the Robertson panel and everything, UFOs were pretty widely accepted, weren't they?
Yeah, people talk about how big it is, like it's the hottest topic in pop culture right now, they say. But if you go back to the Kenneth Arnold times, when that term flying saucer was first coined, and right after the Roswell years and Project Blue Book, huge amounts of books were written, TV shows were made, documentaries, films, movies. Chariots of the Gods came out from Eric von Däniken. There has been a time in our past when the whole UFO thing was just as big as it is today. And there's been resurgencies over time. And so when people think, oh, it's coming into vogue, no, it's come in and out of vogue a lot. And for some reason, it always gets to a certain point, and then it kind of concludes. And if we look at what's happening now, it's been almost 10 years since Lou Elizondo got in front of a camera and said, oh, the Pentagon's studying UFOs. And we got 3 crappy videos that could end up just being our own technology, what it looks like. And we haven't gotten much sense. Even this latest round of government disclosure has been pretty pointless. There's been just a lot of stuff that has already been in the public and a lot of stuff that's already been debunked and nothing definitive. So at the end of the day, we're just seeing the same thing. I'm hoping that it's going to end up with some kind of disclosure. There's got to be a reason that they're coming forward at this time and bringing it out. And I know that within the community of people that are guarding this secret, these are people we'll never see on TV. We'll never know who they are, but they are divided onto how much we should be told or if we should be told at all. I'm not going to be surprised if we don't get acknowledgement of non-human intelligence, but it's going to come out like, oh yeah, there's probably aliens. Imagine that. We're not sure what that is. So let's all find out together. We've never reverse engineered anything. That's silly. Yeah, Scout's honor, right? That's kind of the theme they're going to hit us with. And it's just like, okay.
So what do you think of the statement, we can't tell our friends without telling our enemies? That seems to be a justification for hiding the tech because we don't want Russia and China to get it. And some people already argue that they've already leapfrogged us on it. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's almost a direct quote from Lou Elizondo. I think he even says that in my first movie because he's in there a lot. So yeah. Look, there's some things that obviously deserve the cover of national security, but just like Nick Pope says in the new movie, he says, look, if there's aliens, that's not classified. There's no reason that should be classified.
Exactly.
If we've captured craft and we've had some success reverse engineering them, maybe some of the results of that should be classified. But at the end of the day, the fact that this is going on should not be a blanket secret from humanity. And this has been going on since the beginning of our written records. Before it was the government and shadow groups within the government that aren't really accountable to anybody front facing. Before that, it was the churches and the religious leaders that took this stuff and swept it under the rug. And so the deception has been going on since the beginning of our recollection. The presence of non-human intelligence has been written about from cave paintings to the Bible. So this has been a part of the human story since day one, just as the cover-up has been. So, the question that you got to ask is what's really going on and why is it that this has to be continuously kept from us?
Well, it isn't like Russia and China don't know. With their spy apparatuses, there is no way in the world that they don't know that we have this stuff because we know they have this stuff. And so the things you're saying are absolutely true. There is no reason to do this. And you could argue that religion could be part of it. They're worried about religion falling apart. But I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you. I'm actually a pastor, Ron. I'm not a religious person. I consider myself a spiritual person. And I think if a pastor can research this stuff, if he can go out and get involved, I don't promote this stuff on my podcast. That's not what I'm here for, but I'm just talking about it. We're going to hit some questions on exactly the impact later, but I'm just using that as an example that why are you keeping it from people? If you're afraid that this is going to destroy religion or this is going to destroy the economy or this is going to destroy, other things and cause mass panic, I don't think it is. I think, in fact, there's a recent study from the Disclosure Foundation, which had 6 PhDs who basically came out recently and did their study and said, we can handle it. And so it's getting ridiculous at this point, don't you think, Ron, that it hasn't come out?
There used to be that question is, can we handle the truth or not? And, everybody just wants to throw up that blanket answer. Of course we can. But I think it has a lot to do with, there's more nuance to it. Mm-hmm. It has a lot to do with the context of it. If the revelation of these non-human intelligence among us is, hey, there's aliens, there's all kinds of different life forms we don't know about and that we're just discovering, or that even we've been interacting with, but life goes on. They don't mean us any harm, and we'll keep you posted. That's cool. Everybody just absorbs the knowledge. They say, yeah, I told you so. We knew that. And everybody, life goes on. But if that same announcement is, hey, there's a variety of non-human intelligence, some are from other planets, some have been living here. Well, as soon as warmonger people hear that there's another intelligent species on the planet, we're just absolutely going to have to kill them. That because that's how we operate. So, and then if they say we have no defense against these things, or maybe they have nefarious designs on our planet or whatever, if in that context, that's when we start to see societal disruption. And then when we look at it from the religious standpoint, all of the religions have talked about non-human intelligence, and some of it even refer to extraterrestrials, especially you have those references in Islam. The idea, and the Catholic Church came out with the Many Worlds Edict back in the 17 or 1800s, where they actually openly acknowledged that perhaps there are multiple species on multiple planets. And then the Catholic Church again, 2 or 3 years ago, came out with a revised statement that said, yes, there could be extraterrestrials, there could be intelligent life on other planets, and that does not interfere with your belief in God. It just means that they're God's children too. So disruption of traditional religious beliefs, that could happen to a certain degree, but I don't think it's enough of a reason to continue to keep this a secret.
Right. And I just, like I said, I think the movie Disclosure Day, she said the exact same statement you did.
Mm-hmm.
And I often, when I talk to people about it, I'm an experiencer too as well, Ron. So I'm kind of a weird mixed bag here. But when I talk to other Christians about it, I just say, how large is this universe? And I try to break it down, in parts and just make it realize that there's no way we can even fathom how big this universe is. When you understand how big our solar system is inside of a galaxy, inside of a universe with billions of galaxies, I mean, you can't even begin. Like a grain of sand on the beach, you took all the beaches in the world and you had a 1 billion mile sand dune, we would be one grain of sand in that sand dune. And so, well, why would there only be one planet with life? That doesn't make any sense. Let's get back to your movie Next. What surprised you the most while making Next? Was there one interview or discovery that completely changed the direction of the film for you? Or did it pretty much go straight the way you planned it?
No, the film took me 2 years to do, and it wasn't supposed to. I had a pretty good idea of the direction that I wanted to go. It was going to be kind of a historical follow-up on the Washington, D.C. scenario. And then I wanted to go to expand on where the first film went, into consciousness, into AI, into simulation theory, and how that applies to contemporary spirituality and all that stuff. So I pretty much had that mapped out. But I kept waiting. I mean, I'm hanging around in Washington, D.C. because there's going to be one more hearing, one more witness, one more big revelation. And you don't want to put the movie out and then all of a sudden a week later, the bombshell drops. But unfortunately, I literally got tired of waiting. It's like, okay, well, that was a nothing burger. Okay, that was a nothing burger. Okay, nothing's going to happen from this. And so that's why I just cut Washington, D.C. off 40 minutes into the film with the broken record scene. It's like, okay, enough. Something might happen after I put this to rest, but it's probably, and I, as a filmmaker, and I took the risk that we weren't going to get any major revelation that was going to make the film obsolete. And so, that was the biggest surprise, was that the longer I waited, the more it dragged out, and the more it apparently is going to continue to drag out, and how predictably unpredictable it's all become. And the other thing is that Skywatch is asking some good questions. The other thing is that I watched this evolution of our politicians. And because I met Tim Burchett back in, I think, 2020 or so, and I sat in his office and I told him what us as UFO investigators would tell these people if we had the chance. And I videotaped it, and it's in the new movie. So anybody who says, who's telling the Congress about, what MUFON would say? They're getting briefed by people in the military that can't talk, But is anybody walking in saying, look, we already know that something happened at Roswell. We already know there's reverse engineering programs. We already know all this stuff. And that these people that are denying it are lying. And so, the question is, has anybody ever said that to the Congress people? And I'm like, yeah, I said it and I recorded it and it's in the movie. So to all the people in the UFO community, I can tell you, Andre Carson, Kirsten Gillibrand, Tim Burchett, a couple other ones that aren't as involved in this, Eric Burleson, I've laid it out for these guys personally. And so they know. But what we've seen happen is in the very beginning of this, these guys are gung-ho. Marco Rubio, case in point. That guy was going to get to the bottom of this come hell or high water. Well, after that first hearing, he snuck out the back of the closed-door session and didn't say much more about it. And even when he was in Age of Disclosure, he's since almost thrown that movie under the bus in some interviews. So what's going on with that? And what's going on is that these guys over time have gotten their security clearances so that when people from the Defense Department go in and talk to them about these things, they can tell them a lot more than they were able to tell them in the beginning. And so where they used to say, hey, we're gung-ho, we're going to get the truth and we're going to bring it to the people, damn it. When they used to talk like that, now they're saying things like, well, I was told some stuff in a skiff, and if the public knew about that, they'd be very panicked. And it's like, okay, congratulations, members of Congress, you've all become part of the problem. And I think that's the biggest surprise, is watching the evolution of these people from promising to do anything to bring the truth to the public to now actually openly keeping secrets from us when they're supposed to be the ones that we wanted to help us get to the bottom of it. They're part of they're part of it now.
Do you think that, that maybe they've been read in, and now that they've read in and know that there's no longer any mystery for them, and so they got this security clearance they don't want to lose, and so, well, hey, I know what's going on now. I don't really care if everybody else knows. Do you think that's some of it?
No, I think that once you get read in, I've always had this idea that it's a lot easier to get somebody to keep a secret when they believe it's a secret that needs to be kept. If you threaten people with the destruction of their livelihood or anything else, if they reveal a secret, that tends to spark rebellion. It tends to spark a desire to figure out some way to get the stuff out. I think that once they're read in, they're like fully on board with why we're not being told some of the things we're not being told. I think that it makes sense to them and they understand. And that's scary, truthfully.
So what do you think they heard that
in my movie? There's a dark side to disclosure, a secret too terrible to be told. And I suspect what some of that is, but it's a
hard thing because that seems to be whispering around here and there, but nobody seems to be able to drag out anything to show us what we're supposed to be afraid of, which is the thing. It's like dangling out there, but with this whole stuff, you never know what's real and what's not, Ron.
Well, I think that's what we need to be afraid of, is the fact that this isn't about little green men from another planet. This is about a complete multidimensional evolution in how we perceive our own reality and come to grips with our place in the universe. And it's an existential reset that might not sit well with a lot of people.
That's what I'm wondering. If you're looking at all the damaging part, what could happen, isn't the psychological part probably the scariest part from what you just told me? I mean, it fits right with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Your Skywatch guy is asking some interesting questions. Yeah, General McCaslin.
If you want to answer him, I'll leave him up. If you want to answer him.
He's right about McCaslin. McCaslin had a secret Twitter account that he was spilling information. He was dropping stuff to Tom DeLonge years ago. And I believe that some of these people that are disappeared, not all of them, but there's some connections to some of them that are dead or missing. They were considering becoming whistleblowers. And as soon as they started to explore that, they got on a crap list and they needed to be taken out of circulation one way or another. The people that have the information to genuinely come forward as a true whistleblower and challenge this new narrative of controlled disclosure, those people are a bigger threat now than they were. And so, I think that we're seeing that the days of, you could disappear in the desert, nobody'd ever find you, that we thought were over, they might be back. And that if you're enough of a threat to the new narrative, you might be in danger. And so that's a sad day. Anyway, I diverted. So
no, you did. Well, we're still going on. We're
I'll just kind of not look at the chat room.
No, it's okay. No. Skywatcher's a good friend, and we appreciate him being here. So if you see a question that pops up and you want to address it, just go ahead and address it, because that's what we're here for. We're not here for me to ask certain questions. If you see a question that you think is relevant that needs to be addressed, just jump in and say, hey, I'd like to answer this question. And what about the one from Lou about what he knew in the beginning? Because I saw you kind of perk up when you saw that one. How would you answer that?
Yeah, what was it again? Let's see.
About what Lou knew.
Yeah, so it's not so much what he spoke of in the beginning that he doesn't speak of now. It's the things that he didn't speak of in the beginning that he speaks of now. So in my very first Accidental Truth movie, we have Lou saying things like, well, we're at a point in time where, bad Lou impression, but we're at a point in time where government and industry are going to start looking at this and taking it seriously. He actually said that to me in 2018. And it's like, dude, perfectly well, they've been studying this thing for 100 years. So why are you putting on this act? And the idea of crash retrievals and legacy programs and all this stuff, he was never going to say a word about that. If TTSA would have worked out the way they wanted it to, then that would have been a trajectory for disclosure that's far different than the trajectory we're on now. But movies like the one I made, movies like that have been made by other people, their whole thing got derailed. And the TTSA route towards disclosure became obsolete for a bunch of reasons. And so now Lou will sit in front of Congress and say, oh yeah, there's legacy programs, we're reverse engineering craft. He never would have stepped out of that. He never would have said that in 2018. And which leads to my point that guys like Lou, it's like being in the mafia. You never stop working. And I believe that he's been serving this narrative in whatever capacity they've needed him to. And in his mind, he's doing that as a patriot and a keeper of his oath and a soldier. But he's still an instrument of unseen hands, putting forth a story that is being crafted for us in real time.
Yeah, I've often wrestled with that, 'cause Lou's, I know Lou, and I hear that narrative, and I wrestle with, is that the right narrative, or is it that he's being told what he can't say? And I guess it's debatable that either one, but I think that's what frustrates a lot of us, is we're dependent on the government because they have all the secrets, right? And so how do we get to disclosure if the government's not going to get it to us? Or are we just going to go beyond disclosure? What are your thoughts? What are we supposed to do if the very things you're talking about are never going to get us anywhere, or at least where a lot of people hope? Then what course of action should we be taking?
Well, it's interesting. Just one more thing about Lou. There's 3 spots in my movie where there's some interesting things about Lou. The first one is when he testifies that we need whistleblower protection. We immediately cut to a scene from my conversation with him where he absolutely swears he is not a whistleblower and he will never be a whistleblower. And so that's like, dude, which is it? And then there's the other scene where he holds up the fake UFO photo, which I'm kind of using to illustrate the point that he's going to do whatever he's told to do if the person that tells him to do it is somebody he needs to take orders from. That, he went into a room, into an event with sitting members of Congress present, and held up a fake UFO image at the same time Eric Davis was trying to convince Eric Burleson that there's really aliens. And so that really blew the wind out of the sails of a lot of stuff. And then we had the hearing where he admitted that Lockheed Martin was the company that had those materials. And the audience, when they watch my movie, is going to see a very funny story. We were sitting in the back of the room during the hearing, and this is all documented and shown in the movie. We were texting Eric Burleson questions to ask them in real time. And when we got that in to go after Lou, because I've been trying to get to the bottom of this materials that was supposed to go to Bigelow Aerospace, we're trying to get to the bottom of that for years. And Lou finally spilled the beans because we texted the question for Eric to ask him about the materials transfer from Lockheed Martin and it getting covered up and sequestered suppressed by the intel community. And he spilled the beans about it, that indeed that really happened. And then and that was us that did that. We're sitting in the back of the room literally texting questions. And if I told that story without the proof, nobody would believe it. But it's in the movie and you see it actually really happening. And then I went to Gary Nolan and told him about it. And Gary says, yeah, I was on the team that was supposed to get that stuff and I know where it's at. And that's in the movie. And so, you know, Lou is the gift that keeps on giving, and he's still doing it.
Yeah. But even you said Gary, so it's like, oh my goodness, what if they all know? Is it just a matter of them trying to figure out a way to get it out? Or is it just...
I mean, and we really have to take into consideration that it's quite possible that whatever these beings are have a say. In fact, they could be controlling the process themselves. So, you know, don't hate all the people who have been keeping it a secret for all this time, because maybe they're doing it because they have to. We just don't know how high up the ladder it goes. But yeah, that's why this panel is kind of cracking me up. We've got people on this panel that already know. And like, if you go, I've been to the Saul conference, and one time I was backstage at Alien Con. A guy was speaking there, and Travis Taylor was there, and Jay Stratton was there, and Gary Nolan was there. And I was sitting at a table behind them, listening to them talk to each other. And it was really cracking me up, because they were genuinely acting like none of them knew anything. And I realized that they're so wrapped up in their clearances that they can't even tell each other what they know. And it was hilarious. And I actually have a still picture of when I was sitting at the table, because, you know, again, it's one of those things that nobody would believe. But yeah, I overheard the whole conversation, and I just left kind of shaking my head.
All right, let's just jump over a little bit. I wanted to talk some questions about Disclosure Day too, because you had put that on.
Yeah.
One of the things. You must have really, I know I did, and I understand the danger of it. I understand maybe it's not necessarily a good thing, but in the movie you can kind of enjoy it because there are no real repercussions. But the fact that Daniel Kellner not only broke his NDA, you know, and I guess some whistleblowers have done it, but none of the ones who've gone to the hearings have done it. But
right.
Not only did that, but he brought out stuff, you know, from Vortex and all the evidence. And it's like, so what were your thoughts when that happened in the movie?
Yeah. Well, first, let's talk about whistleblowers, right?
Okay.
We don't have any whistleblowers. If you have to get what you are going to say publicly approved by the Department of Defense, you are not a whistleblower. Okay. You're an instrument of the narrative. And that goes for Lou. It goes for David Grush. It goes for Gallaudet. It goes for all these guys that can't say anything unless it's cleared. They're not whistleblowers. They're doing good work, but they're not whistleblowers. The guy in Disclosure Day, that's catastrophic disclosure. That's whistleblowing. And that's really what I think would be fantastic to see. I'm one of those people who thinks catastrophic disclosure is long overdue. These people have had plenty of time to get their story straight and tell us something of substance, and they're just not doing it. So the idea that there could be a real life person like that who gets in there and grabs the evidence and gets it out and does that heroic deed and leaks it to the public and doesn't get killed, I would love to see that. And hopefully there's people out there that may do it one day. But Disclosure
will inspire somebody.
Pardon
you
me?
Think that possibly might inspire somebody?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that would love to do it if they could pull it off. It's a difficult situation because, like, say you're Hal Puthoff, and Hal knows a whole lot of stuff, or even Eric. These guys know a lot of things that if they were to bring out what they know and just go public with it, it would shed tons of light on this, and they'll even tell you that. The problem is, unless you're literally bringing a UFO on a truck and parking it someplace where the public can access it and civilian scientists can access it, unless you're bringing definitive, irrefutable proof, then chances are you're going to take the biggest risk of your life and destroy yourself in every way imaginable, and still be able to be marginalized and ridiculed. And so, short of what we saw on Disclosure Day with catastrophic collection of evidence and a genuine alien to back everything up, these guys don't have anything to gain from just going out and saying, hey, I worked in a legacy program. It's like they'll be discredited immediately. They'll be punished. And unless they have definitive, irrefutable proof, they'll just be dismissed and life goes on for everybody else, and they've lost everything. So they're in a tough spot.
Right. Well, just kind of, even with some of the people you mentioned, I guess the hard part for me to wrap my mind about, if it's all they're following a narrative, then why did David Grush go through everything he went through? Why did Lou go through everything that he went through? And so there's some kind of a balance in there between where what you're saying is absolutely true. They're being controlled in what they can say, or what they can't say. It would be a better way of saying that. But that doesn't mean that they're basically taking marching orders from somebody else. It just means they are being in their own way restrained, is the way I understand it anyway. Because otherwise I don't understand, the fact that they have been attacked, that people have gone after me, and we all know what happened to David Grush and stuff. And I know there was a point in time where he really regretted coming out. Now things are starting to turn around for him. Burleson brought him on board and stuff. But I just hope people understand that even if we don't use the word whistleblower, I respect what you're saying there, Ron, a lot, because a whistleblower truly is the person who just comes out and spills the beans, so I don't disagree with you on that as well. I think maybe we use that term, glorified that term a little bit. So yeah, I don't disagree with you on that, but I still think that the people, that have come out and spoken, even if they've been restrained by DOPSR, we need to respect that, there's probably 1,000 or 10,000 that did not come out and say a damn word. And so I hope we can realize that, I think the movie Disclosure Day, I think that's one of the things Spielberg got right, was the fact that who's the real enemy here. And it really is, even though I thought they did a good job of normalizing Noah Scanlon with his wife, it really portrayed, the government is basically, the military has used, these military contractors to do all their dirty work. And so they come out looking like the bad guys. And in a sense, they are, aren't they?
I don't know. Bad guys, good guys. Everybody that's involved in this all has their own view of their own morality in it. The people that have been at the deepest echelons of this, covering it up for as long as they've been covering it up, in their own minds, they believe they're doing the right thing. Now, whether that's coming from, sociopathic or psychopathic thinking, is up for debate. But, take Lou, for example. His career in intel, in disinformation people, their entire job is to fabricate false narratives and get them in front of the people that need to absorb them. So basically that is, creating falsehoods for a living, for the right reasons, supposedly. So these are people that do this and they think that they're doing the right thing. And so good guys, bad guys. Yeah.
Right, you're probably right about that, Ron.
There's groups. But
Bassett always hits me on that.
Everybody thinks they've done the right thing for the right reasons.
Yeah. Bassett hits me on that. I've lived in my world, unfortunately, a little too long, where you measure things, good or bad. And I think society, we tend to do that too. But, sometimes there's a fine line or a nuance between one and the other. You can do 90 things that are good and do one or two things that are bad, and that doesn't necessarily make you bad. So I do appreciate you.
Yeah, we live in gray areas. Back to the Disclosure Day, a lot of people have been disappointed with that movie, especially in our community. And I wrote a column for the Wow Signal newsletter, and one of the ones that I wrote was about, don't have your expectations too high. This is a movie. This is a guy that brought us crazy men building sandcastles in their living room and aliens on bicycles. So the pattern in Spielberg movies is there's grains of truth wrapped in a fantastical story. And so what he did was he took all of the beats of what we know to be a pretty accurate depiction of the history of this. He took the government cover up. He took how it was sequestered into private industry. He took the experiencer phenomenon, and then he took very specific cases and he put them, Roswell and Kecksburg and Jackie Gleason and Eisenhower. He took all this stuff, and if he was building a plot, he took these things as building blocks, and then he weaved a fantastic science fiction story around it. But he still hit all the beats. There were moments in that movie that literally brought tears to my eyes because I was thinking, my God, somebody's finally saying this to the world. And so I think Disclosure Day deserves a lot more credit than it's getting. And people need to understand it's a movie. But he did a service to all of us. And there's all kinds of Easter eggs in there. Like the Nathan Twining name. Have you heard about that?
No.
So
I saw the movie twice, but
movie,
I must have missed that reference.
In the movie, there's the villain is asking his staff to identify all the different people that broke away and took the evidence. And one of the person's names is Nathan Twining, they say, which of course, if you know anything about the history, we know that Nathan Twining wrote a memo to President Eisenhower about UFOs being real. And so there's all kinds of little things like that buried in the movie.
I think we agree 100% on the movie Disclosure Day, because I feel like it's one of those movies that maybe some people just weren't ready for. And I think over time, even those in the community are going to eventually, once they get rid of their own private pet peeve, on something they didn't like, they're going to look back on it and go, wow, because the very things that you just laid out, there's so much in there that is absolutely spot on. But
he hit all the beats.
Yeah,
the biggest I left out, the societal implications on religion. I mean, it's all there.
Absolutely.
And the fact that we wrapped it around deer with cardinals on their antlers and people with crazy eyes and a chase scene and trains, that's how you make a movie. But the building blocks that created that movie were true to the community, and I believe true to the history. And so, kudos to Steven Spielberg. And I wish that there wasn't such a polarization about the movie. People aren't seeing it for the amazing contribution that it is.
Absolutely. Now, one thing I appreciated about it being an experiencer, and I have friends on both sides of the spectrum. I have those that are on the experiencer side. I have friends who are on the abductee side, where they're angry, they're bitter, and they're hurt. They're traumatized by it. And I got others of it that see purpose. So, but I liked is when they had Margaret as a little girl on the table, and they brought Daniel in as a little boy. Margaret seemed to be fine. She was walked in with the animals, which were aliens, of course. But he was really traumatized, and she was the one who reached out and held his hand. And I thought that was a beautiful picture and a kind of a metaphor as well. It was a beautiful picture of the fact that not everybody experiences these things exactly the same. And Ron, I'm going to tell this story again because I've told it before, but it really illustrates that so much of this is perception. I'm not saying it all is, but I have my dental hygienist. She went with a friend to LaGrange, Oregon, which is 2 or 3, 4 hours away from here. And they were looking up at the sky, and she sees this green, large sphere, and it's almost as big as the moon. She's staring at it, and she shows her friend, and the second her friend sees it, she doesn't want anything to do with it. She's absolutely terrified by it. And this is what I hear over and over again. Two people can see the exact same thing and have two completely different responses to it. And like I said in Chris's interview, I'm not saying which one is right. I'm just saying the perception is different, and it's the same exact thing. And when we see that in the community, and I think if we would just learn to respect each other, regardless of which side you're on, and just realize every person has a right to how they feel. Every person.
That's what I like to call the quantum nature of truth. We used to think that everything was black and white, and we're living in different realities, subjective and consensus. and we're all having different experiences. And so what may be true for you, you might have stood on the beach and saw a UFO because that was what you were meant to see. I might have seen a seagull because I wasn't meant to see that. We have to understand that different things can be correct, even though they contradict each other, especially when dealing with the nature of reality. And yin and yang existing in the same space at the same time. If we can accept that that's a thing, it'll make it a lot easier for us to settle our differences, because we can realize there doesn't have to be a right or wrong. You might see the phenomena as angels or demons according to your belief system and the way you've been educated. And I might say, you know, there are filters and beliefs that have perfectly valid that may best describe what we're seeing as those things. But could you please keep an open enough mind that there could be other things happening as well? And once we get to that point, you know, that could be one of the biggest things these things are trying to teach us is a better understanding and a better acceptance of each other's perceptions. Because at the end of the day, we're not going to get anywhere. We're never going to get off this planet if we can't learn to get along amongst ourselves and learn to accept other people's viewpoints without being challenged by them or threatened by them or feeling like you have to fight for your own. And we're seeing this. We're seeing the wagon circle right now over what these things are. And some people with very, very rigid belief systems are willing to fight about it. And that's what happened to Lou Elizondo in the Pentagon, as a lot of people with a traditional backgrounds literally interfered with his funding. And we're seeing that the perception among some religious fundamentalists is that it's angelic, it's demonic, that's all it can be. We shouldn't be messing with it. That's that. And they're not willing to listen to, well, okay, maybe, you know, it's all cool, but could it be something else too? And we're seeing this rigidity, and the idea that disclosure could create conflict is, I didn't see that coming, but I'm seeing it now. And so it's one of those things that makes me think, well, maybe we might not be ready.
Right. Well, the thing you're talking about, believe it or not, the people I get the most frustrated with in the community are Christians. For some of the same reasons that you're saying. They're just so rigid. And Ron, to be fair, when I came into this community, you know, I have a master's degree. I laid all of that aside, all of my religious training aside. And I, you know, to the best of my ability, I wanted to look at this with a blank slate, right? I just wanted to see what it was without, you know, if you think everything's a nail, I mean, I can't remember how you say it, but anyway, if you're a hammer, you think everything's a nail. That's how you say it. And so right. I didn't want that to happen. And so I tried, and we're all biased by our experiences. I'm biased by my training, but I really honestly did the best I could by trying to set that aside. I was in Roswell in 2024, and there was a guy that was doing a presentation on UFOs and the second coming. And Joseph Jordan, I think his name was. I met him, and he was steadfast that this is all demons. And and I mean, he would not budge an inch. And I just finally realized, you know, he said, well, show me in the Bible anywhere when it talks about aliens. And I said, well, the Bible says God created the heavens and the earth. That would include other planets and possibly other species. But it's the very thing you just described. But we see it everywhere. We see it between Russia and the US. You know, we see that rigidness, and that's what has us in trouble.
Yeah. And, you know, once we start to realize that the reason that we're still facing this and the reason it's a challenge is because you can't be right without making me wrong. And so I don't want to be wrong. So I'm going to fight for my point of view, and I'm going to ridicule you for yours. But what people don't understand and what needs to seep into the broader consciousness is that we're dealing with a very flexible, fluid reality where multiple things can be true. And so just respect this other person for the journey they're on, acknowledge that there could be validity to it. It might not be your truth, but it could be your truth. And that, you know what, that's okay. And this whole subject around the phenomenon, around disclosure, is illustrating what a challenge this is for humanity. And if this phenomena exists for no other reason than to get us to start looking at things in a different way, then maybe it accomplished its goal.
Okay. I want to get one more thing on your movie to make sure we plug it once again. Accidental Truth Next. If there was one message in that movie, in your documentary, what would you want it to be? What would you want people to take from your movie? What's the heart of it?
We're not yet asking the right questions, and I invite everybody that watches the movie to start thinking about what those questions should be.
Okay. Now, maybe this question isn't relevant anymore after our long discussion, but let me ask it anyway. As we talk about the biggest obstacles to disclosure, do you think the biggest obstacle is classified information? Do you think it's corporate interest? Do you think it's national security concerns? Or maybe the fear of societal implications, that society is going to panic? Which of those four do you think, would you say, is probably the biggest obstacle to us getting there?
The biggest obstacle, believe it or not, I think isn't one of those four. I think it's greed and accountability. There's two major problems that we're dealing with. Is that there's this whole legal quagmire of, well, if the government gave Lockheed Martin some materials, but they didn't give them to Northrop Grumman, and Lockheed Martin developed these materials into something that they could get a government contract to utilize, then what are the legalities of that? It's illegal to actually operate that way in government. And then who owns this stuff? Does Lockheed own it? Because right now Lockheed wants it. They say they own it. And I know for a fact that this debate is going on. So there's this gigantic legal quagmire about accountability, about legality, and then, just basic greed. The companies that got this stuff and have researched it for years and years and years, they want that edge, and they want to own that stuff, and they want those patents. And the arguments that are happening behind the scenes are about that kind of thing. Who is going to own this stuff? And these eminent domain questions that keep coming up that Schumer tried to write into the first UFO legislation that says, if you develop technology from reverse engineered stuff, the government owns it, the people own it. And private industry is saying, no, that's not true. You gave us the stuff. We did it fair and square. We don't even have to tell you what we found out and what we built. So there's that. And then the whole greed factor. If there's a power supply, for instance, that they got off a craft that could result in a box that would power your house, charge your car, the entire infrastructure of the planet, the finance, the systems of control, the money that filters all the way to the very top, that all goes bye-bye. That entire structure collapses, and humanity is no longer enslaved by the system that we're in. That's the problem. The accountability and greed are the two things keeping disclosure from happening.
And a lot of that you would agree would probably fall within the corporate interest. That's a lot of what you just described.
Yeah. The corporations, they have their own armies. These corporations they're gigantic behemoths, and these shadow programs are they're accountable to nobody. They are no longer accountable to any front-facing politician. They don't have to be accountable to people within the Pentagon for a lot of this stuff. And the front-facing people in the Pentagon know nothing about any of it. They're all part of the ridicule factor. Don't talk about UFOs. There's only a very few people in our government that actually know, because everything is buried so deep in these compartmentalized programs that they've lost accountability years ago. And we may never know the truth. In fact, I don't believe that we're ever going to find out the whole truth about all of this.
Okay. Well, let me ask another question. I want you to take a position of the President of the United States for a minute. And so you mentioned that it's nuanced as we talk about disclosure. There's one thing saying that there are aliens out there, we think they're out there. It's another thing to say that they're right here with us. But if you were the president, I started with a day, but then I realized you probably couldn't do this in a day. But how would you bring about disclosure in a way that would minimize public fear, that would minimize the impact on the economy, on religion, on science, and stuff like that?
Well, the first thing I try to do is bridge the gap between guys like David Grush and the things that Lou Elizondo was actually able to talk about, and guys like Eric Davis and guys like Gary Nolan. I would bridge the gap between what they can say and what we're still officially delivering to the public. We're putting Gary Nolan on a panel that's going to serve the White House. Gary Nolan knows about the existence of craft. He's studied material that has non-human origin. He knows all this stuff. So why is he on a panel where he can't say what he knows, supposedly serving us? I would bridge the gap between what the so-called whistleblowers have already revealed and what we're able to say officially. Because right now we've got David Grush saying we got reverse engineered craft. We got the Pentagon dropping pictures of debunked flares flying around. So I would try to bridge that gap and take the people that know what they know, get their story straight, and deliver it with official acknowledgement that there's many elements of it that are correct. I would take the crowd that we're watching right now, and I would give them official legitimacy in the stories they're telling.
Is there anything we can do about non-disclosure agreements? Is there any way that we can give people where something's criminal, where maybe, like you said, you find out somebody's been murdered trying to protect these secrets? Is there a way of fixing that, the non-disclosure agreements?
Well, I mean, there is in theory, but one thing that you brought up a little while ago that I didn't properly address that's matched to this is that Lou and David Grush and others have faced so-called repercussions. And that's illustrative of the fact that there is a tug of war going on behind the scenes among people who want this stuff out and people that don't. And they are all in a position of power to do these things. And so the illusion of obstacles, this whole thing about, David Grush, they're going to get him for espionage. Let me clue you in on something. They're not going to get him for espionage. It makes the story more interesting. It makes the threat more interesting. It makes the credibility of the whistleblower more interesting, but nobody's going to prosecute David Grush. It's just not going to happen. So when we talk about the question that you asked originally, sorry, I'm having a brain fart. That all plays into the fact that, what was the question again?
I was moving on to the next one. You were talking about the repercussions that whistleblowers, that's how you introduced and you came back into it.
Your original question, I was blabbing.
Yeah, well, I was just talking about, maybe whistleblower is not the correct term when we understand, which the other thing I'll side with you on is the word threat. I don't think that word is the proper word either. Because if you applied that same word to people you don't know, we don't know what their intentions are. And so we call them a threat. Well, then we'd have to call everybody in the world we don't know a threat, correct?
Yeah. And your question was about people in their NDAs. Yeah. There is no way to really guarantee the safety of people in their NDAs. What I've seen is that groups like Arrow, I don't believe Arrow was founded to facilitate people that want to come forward and be whistleblowers. I think it was founded to identify people that want to come forward and be whistleblowers and figure out how to stop them. And so Kirsten Gillibrand, in my movie, I asked her, I said, look, do me a favor, Senator, look at my camera right now and promise whistleblowers that they're going to be okay. And she looks right at the camera, it's in the movie, and says, whistleblowers will be safe. I can guarantee that. And then we cut to Dylan Borland talking about how he's lost his job. His whole world's fallen apart. Yeah. There's no way to guarantee safety to whistleblowers. And this whole idea of, we'll pass legislation that'll excuse you from your NDA. At the last hearing where we broke in, John Kozlowski is the new guy at Arrow. He's sitting right next to Susan Guff, who is the Pentagon spokesperson that is known for floating the narrative. And she is staring at him and staring at the camera. And I believe that was a warning. We're talking about openness and we're talking about projecting whistleblowers, but you better keep your mouth shut. And that's what came out of that. So there's no real definitive way, I believe, to totally and completely protect these people. Even if we say, hey, you're out of your NDA, they're still gonna have problems.
Okay, this is closing towards the end here. Did you encounter any witnesses who appeared genuinely traumatized by their experiences? And if you did, I mean, shouldn't researchers kind of approach those people a little bit differently with some sensitivity? Or, I mean, did you run into that with people that were traumatized by their encounters?
Yeah, well, I'm the media relations director at MUFON and for MUFON, and we have the biggest and most credible group of people studying the experiencer phenomenon. And what we find is that people that have had this happen to them, we're talking about like abductees that have a history of having these encounters. Over the course of their life, they generally come to consider this, part of their lives. They accept it, and some of them almost say that it's been beneficial in some way. But there's also, especially in the beginning of these things happening, they're all severely traumatized, or very big groups of them. And you can see this by the way they end up living their lives. They can't talk about what's happened to them. They tend to fall down socioeconomic ladders. They tend to be physically not taking the best care of themselves. I mean, they're just basically diminished people in some cases. I'm not trying to stereotype experiencers in any way, but I'm saying that we see a trend of visible signs of trauma in the way the person presents to the world that it's consistent and undeniable. And so, we run into that a lot.
Yeah, I've got a friend that put together a chart, and it was really, really good. And it talks about the different groups that normally experiencers come out, abductees come out, and 90% of the people out there aren't prepared, don't have the ability to help them. And then they run to the X community and they get involved with the researchers and the interviewers, and they become exploited for their story, but nobody's there trying to help them. And then they had the C category, which is, the groups like Yvonne Smith has, Zero, and stuff like that, where you actually go in with other experiencers and find that healing. But I know people, and like I said, I think I agree with you 100% about what the normal process is. But I also know people that are still hurt, still angry, that they haven't gotten to that yet. That brings up a really important question. This will be my next to last question, and that is, we're talking about crash retrieval. We're talking about reverse engineering. We're talking about, alien bodies. And yet, in none of these hearings has there been an experiencer or an abductee brought forward on them. So do you think, Ron, if they're going to have another hearing, do you think that we need to have credible experiencers, abductees, people like what I would consider credible, Mario Woods, Jason Sands, Deborah Jordan Cobble? Do you think that's the next step?
Well, that's very interesting that you brought that question up. I do believe that experiencers are going to have their day, and that we can't really solve this puzzle without listening to their accounts more and trying to figure out how that applies to the overall thing. So there's going to be a vindication for experiencers. But that being said, I have sat in these rooms and I've had these conversations, and I could be looking at a staffer or a member of Congress, and I can say, look, they've been recovering craft. There's reverse engineering programs. They've recovered alien bodies, and they're all nodding along. And then as soon as you say, and they're taking people and they're doing hybridization programs and they're crossbreeding us with others, with their own species, and they're doing this and they're doing that, their eyes glaze over. They're not ready to bring that out into the vernacular yet. At the event that James Fox and Leslie Kane put up, they mentioned experiencers, finally. And there is talk that we're going to be able to get the experiencer testimony into a congressional hearing. I don't think they're quite there yet, but there are efforts being made.
Okay. All right. Well, let me conclude. I think you said that very, very well. You say we're getting there, but we're not quite there yet.
We're not quite there where they're going to have somebody sit in a congressional hearing and talk about the, being abducted and the experiences they had in a congressional hearing.
Okay. So my question is, where do we go? What's next
for
disclosure?
Well, you know what? We can hope the government process gives us something definitive. So far, it hasn't. acknowledgement of non-human intelligence and what some of them might be would be good. But I have a feeling
if you were to put a percentage on that, Ron,
drag it out for as long as they can.
But if you were to put a percentage on that, what would it be that they're actually going to come out and do that?
Yeah, I'd say 30%. Steve Bassett says 70%. I've got my ear to the tracks. I have the text and the phone numbers of sitting members of Congress, and I'm giving them information. I'll tell you one thing that we're doing that's very exciting. We have put together a list of actual crash retrievals that we know happened with reasonable documentation and the names of witnesses, some of them still alive, that have stories about guarding the craft and all kinds of other things. And we're trying to figure out the best way to get that over to Eric Burleson, and if we even should. He's chomping at the bit for the information, but we've got evidence of these legacy programs. Everybody says legacy program. Well, what was it? Well, it was there was a crash that happened here, and this is kind of craft they recovered, and this is where it went, and this is where they studied it. We've got some of these documents and testimonies that is all going to be coming out. So,
wow. Well, I thought this was a very, very good podcast. I thought you really gave us a great perspective. Because there's people that go this direction, and every once in a while we got to hear somebody going a little bit different. And not that you're out there, because there's a lot of people exactly where you are, but a lot of people that I interviewed, they tend to kind of focus on the disclosure movement and kind of see that as that might be what's going to save us. But
I've seen too much. I've been inside of it. I've seen it unfold. Don't get me wrong. In fact, I say it in the film. That we need to support the government, even though what they're doing, this process is hard to watch. I actually say that because I spoke with Danny Sheehan and Steve Bassett to a group in Washington, D.C. right after the hearings. We had a little press conference outside. So I'm the guy that would love to be proven wrong. I mean, I will stand up and say, I was wrong. I didn't think they were ever going to disclose the whole truth. That I have aspirations for being the guy that was completely wrong about it. I just don't think I am.
Yeah. I think most of us don't. We're not expecting the whole truth, but we're just hoping that, especially with the experiencers and the abductees, that we will finally be vindicated in the sense that, people will know that we're not making stuff up. We're not looking for attention. We've had some extraordinary experiences, and we just want people to believe us.
Dean Alioto, who's a friend of mine, he just made a film about experiencers. It's really funny because I had done the same kind of work with Yvonne Smith in the past and the same kind of work with Travis Walton, but it's a good film, and it's moving, it's advancing the ball. The only thing I could say to the experiencer community is that, besides call MUFON, we've got the experiencer resource team. We've got the best sources for you to find community and to learn more about what's happened to you, but hang in there. Your day is coming, and the truth about what's been happening to you, more and more people are going to believe it, and the stories and the messages that experiencers are receiving are very important because they are these beings telling us what we need to do next and how we need to make ourselves better. It's not like you have a bunch of people all over the world telling completely different stories with completely different messages. We have people all over the world telling the same story about the same beings, giving them the same messages. And to anybody out there that is living the experiencer phenomenon in their own life, hang in there. It's very valid. Find people to talk to about it, contact MUFON, and just know that the credibility of what's happening to you is not going to be ridiculed forever.
Well, I appreciate those encouraging words, and I know that every experiencer is going to watch this podcast is going to feel the exact same way. Well, Ron, it was an honor to have you on. You send me the link for your book where it sells, or your movie. I mean, I'll be glad to put that in the description for the YouTube video so we can promote that. So where is it being sold at right now? Is it on Amazon?
Yeah, it's on the website is accidentaltruthnext.com, and then it has links to where you can get it. Again, it's narrated by Matthew Modine. It's got a special appearance by Thomas Jane. And the music is by Alan Howarth, who did all the Halloween movies and Christine and a bunch of stuff for John Carpenter. So it's got a cool soundtrack. Like that should matter in a UFO doc, but we want to have some fun. And then the first Accidental Truth movie, Accidental Truth UFO Revelations, that's on YouTube now for free, and people can go and watch that one, no cost. And the other one's for rent for a little while, but we gotta make enough money to make the next movie. So
absolutely.
So it's out there. But yeah, it's Accidental Truth Next, accidentaltruthnext.com, or you can just search for it on Amazon, Apple, and Google Play YouTube movies. It shows up.
Well, I was very impressed, not with just the people you had on, but with the technology that you used, because it was high quality filming. It was unbelievably sharp. And maybe it's just me, but when I go watch shows, I like to see ones that are sharp. And to me, it kind of speaks to, if they'll spend the money on that, then it's probably going to be a pretty good story, or, documentary like what you're doing. But anyway, Ron, I want to thank you so much for being here. I'm going to pull you off and I'm going to close this podcast out. Anyway, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
All right. Bye. Well, I want to thank everyone for being here. What an incredible interview. Ron had so much insight. You can tell that he's a man that's been at this for a long, long time. And let me just encourage you, like I do with Darcy Weir and James Fox, let's support our filmmakers. Let's make sure we buy their movies, that we help support them, as Ron said, so they can make the next movie and then the next movie, and continue to help. Maybe we don't get to disclosure today, maybe we don't get to it tomorrow, but we're getting exposure, and exposure, we get enough of it, that is going to lead to disclosure eventually. So anyway, if you haven't done it already, let me ask you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It really would help the channel out, and I appreciate it. God bless, and I will see you next time.
This is the future.